My name is Saleem F Zaru. I am originally from Ramallah. Today I live in Maryland and I work for the oldest Palestinian American humanitarian organization called United Palestinian Appeal. United Palestinian Appeal is headquartered in Washington and has offices in the West Bank, in Gaza, and in Amman in Jordan. And we work in three areas, namely health and wellness, education, and community and economic development. Last year was United Palestinian Appeal 40th anniversary, and I have been with the organization for 8 years. I was born in Jerusalem, but I'm from Ramallah and lived in Ramallah for most of my life. In the late 70s, I left Ramallah and went to the university, the American University in Beirut, and then with the civil war there, didn't stay too long, a year or a year and a half. Then came to the US and studied architecture and city and regional planning in Chicago. I worked in Chicago till 93 or 94, and then moved back to Ramallah and started a practice in Ramallah and helped start a School of Architecture at Al-Najah National University in Nablus. And I stayed there for 10 years, and I was teaching there till the early 90s, and maintained my practice there. And started in 94 when the PA came to Palestine. We were very excited about a new phase in the Palestinian history. And this was the first time in history we would have had a sovereign nation, a sovereign government. Obviously, as you all know, this was not as sovereign as we would have liked it to be. And from there on, things weren't as hopeful as we had hoped. So in 95, still in the beginning of all that, I had a home building company in Palestine, and we started the first mortgage company in Palestine where people could come and buy a home and pay a mortgage like you would in the United States for 20 years. And that opened a new idea in home building. I remember when I was a practicing architect, people would come to my office with a stack of cash that they have been saving all their lives to build a home. This gave them an opportunity, gave the younger generation an opportunity to buy a home and be able to pay for it for a long time. Now, the idea of that was that we were doing this not for investors, not for people coming from the Gulf states to be able to do that, but people who are living there, people who are struggling to make a living, to raise a family, to continue to persevere, to continue to be on the ground, to have a better chance. And we made that available to a lot of young professionals and young people. And in fact, last week was the last person of that period since 94 that just finished his last payment. And that made me feel good in a way that this was happening, but looking at the situation now in Ramallah, things have changed, and some of it to the better, some of it to the worst, but Ramallah has changed quite a bit. It is not the city I knew. It is not the city I grew up in. It is not of the same culture or caliber, or it has become more metropolitan. And with that, there are some good things. With that, there are some bad things. Some of the bad things that I see as a regional planner, Ramallah is taking all the goods of the country. It's taking all the talent. It's taking all the capital. Everything is concentrated in Ramallah. And this is good for Ramallah, but I think this is bad for the country. I think the leadership should be aware about decentralizing the investment, decentralizing the growth, so people outside Ramallah are getting their share of this growth. But I guess that's the nature of cities. They tend to do that, and the remote areas, the rural areas tend to suffer from this. This is unfortunate. If you go outside Ramallah, you would see the villages are not in a good position as they were once. The Palestinian village, before 1967, was the basic economic unit of the Palestinian economy. It was a poor economy, but it was self-sustaining. The villagers never needed any support. They ate what they grew, and a nation that does that is in a good position. Today, we are worried about, can the employees get paid the next month? Can the PA employees get paid till now, between now and the end of the year? And this is a reflection of an economy that is based on aid. And the aid economy is bad for the people benefiting from it. It creates dependency, and it creates a sense of entitlement. And we become thinking, oh, we are entitled to this. People need to help us. And it takes away the sense of independence that was once there. So it hurts me to see that happening. And I hope people are more aware of this, and people do all they can to move away from this situation. This was probably not by coincidence that this happened. I think perhaps there was a plan for this to happen. I remember right after 1967, the Israeli buses came to the cities and to the villages, and they were recruiting laborers, and they took them to the Israeli factories. These laborers were farmers, and they got introduced to a cash economy. They were getting paid at the end of the week rather than wait till they sell their harvest. So the Israelis introduced a cash economy in the Palestinian economy, which at the time seemed to be a good thing, but long term it allowed people or forced people to move away from agriculture, which is a more sustainable way of life. And they became dependent on the Israeli economy. So one day the Israelis closed the border, everybody's out of work. And that created dependency on the Israeli economy and control of the Palestinian economy by the Israelis. So that is a long-term effect, because anytime you leave agriculture for a long time, you can't just go back to it. The culture has changed and the land has changed. You cannot go back and farm a land that has been left fallow for so many years. There has to be all kinds of land reclamation practices to take place to get it back to where it used to be 25 years ago. And that's a predicament the Palestinian economy is facing. We are more dependent on foreign aid, we are more dependent on other economies that have nothing to do with us, nor do we have any control over them. And that is such a shame. But I guess that's the reality. That's the reality of progress, if you will. And I think we need to be aware of that and do all we can to try and if nothing else, just be aware that we could do better than that. We, as Palestinians, feel that everybody has a homeland to live in. In our case, our homeland lives in us. And it's part of who we are to be connected. It's part of our well-being. It's part of our identity. It's part of us being alive, to be connected. If you think about the olive tree is a symbol of endurance, is a symbol of being deeply rooted in the land, and that is such a good symbolism for Palestinians all over the world. Palestinians all over the world might be living in exile, in under occupation, or in the diaspora, but they are very much deeply rooted. They make communities wherever they are that are deeply rooted. And that's the nature of just being Palestinian. On a more practical and less emotional note, I think the reason I am so connected to the issues, other than my personal interests and my personal beliefs and feeling and my family being there and all that, I think my being blessed with being part of an organization that is United Palestinian Appeal, that my work keeps me connected. The responsibility I have to run this organization makes it important that I stay connected, that I understand what's going on, I understand the real issues, and I try with a wonderful group of staff that we have in Washington, in Amman, in the West Bank, and in Gaza to look at these issues and see what we can do to bring about a small change to cultivate hope as we go along. Well, people in the diaspora manage to keep their story alive to varying, to different extents. I mean, some people have a platform to do that. Some people are so busy making a living, making a life, struggling. As you can imagine, being a Palestinian is not an easy thing when you live in the diaspora. It is becoming more difficult every day, and people are working hard to sustain themselves. So keeping the story alive, I assure you, it is alive in their heart, and it will come out when the time is right and when the opportunity presents itself. But when you are struggling day in and day out to put food on the table, to get your kids to go to school, to do all that stuff, sometimes that story is not as vocal as people would like it to be. But that's survival. That is survival, and as Palestinians, we have learned that you do anything you have to do to survive, and that's the reality. But these stories, like I said before, these are so deeply rooted in our existence, in who we are. No matter how silent we are, the stories don't go away. There will be a time where they would surface for every one of us. There is a lot of stories that are surfacing and have been for since 70 years. People are talking about these things, but for you talk about people in the diaspora to different levels. People do what they can. That's all they can do, and every bit helps and every bit is appreciated. But people got to do what they got to do. I have a family. My immediate family is here. My wife and my 3 children are here. We were lucky that my 3 kids were born in Palestine. And when they came here, they were in elementary school, so they are aware of, they grew up in Palestine, they know what it's like. But not just that, kids tend to forget. But we were adamant about sending them back every year to go and spend the summer in our home in Palestine, in Ramallah. And we were adamant about them continuing to learn Arabic, even though they were here. My wife is an Arabic professor, and she maintained their language skills, even though they were going to schools, public school system here in the US. They speak Arabic, they read and write, and they know the grammar and everything else that comes with it, poetry, you name it. So we worked at it, and it's not something that just happened. We worked hard because we thought this was a priority, and we not only wanted them to get the culture, but we wanted them to get the language, because many times the language and the culture, they go hand in hand. Sometimes people think, well, you know, they know the habits, they know the tradition and all that, but it's the language and culture are so intertwined. And that's why we wanted them to maintain their language skills. In a lot of universities nowadays, in the US, the Department of Languages used to be called the Department of Foreign Languages, and they would teach German and French and Chinese and Arabic and you name it. A lot of more progressive universities are changing the name of their departments, and they are calling it the Department of Languages and Culture. So language and culture go hand in hand, and we have to understand that and work for it. I think we as adults have a responsibility not only to teach the language, but to make our children understand that this is something to be proud of. American students spend 4 years in colleges and in high school learning another language. We are blessed to be natural at it. And we need to learn that this is a source of pride, not a source of shame. And if we instill this idea in our children, they will not be embarrassed to speak it. So parents will not be telling you, my kids don't want to speak Arabic. They will tell you, my kids love to speak Arabic. But it's about how we see ourselves, how we perceive ourselves in an environment that is, to say the least, a little bit hostile. And that's just the reality. That's the reality of things. 20 years ago, maybe that wasn't as bad as it is now, or 40 years ago, or whatever. But this is the reality today. In the United States, unfortunately, Palestinian is a dirty word. I think in Europe, Europe is way ahead of the United States in accepting and welcoming the Palestinian narrative. In the US, it is still not where Europe is. It is getting better, though. In the last few years, we have seen some changes that I would say are more progressive in that area. And we need to capitalize on this. We have an opportunity to be vocal about who we are, what we do, our culture, our history, our Palestinian narrative, and that's something to be proud of. So again, like I said, it's hard for the children to speak Arabic when they are being singled out. That's even more reason for them to be singled out. But we need to foster that sense of pride in identity. And all other ethnic groups do that. All other ethnic groups are proud of who they are and what they do and their different foods and everything else. And I don't see why we should be different. When you talk to anyone from Ramallah about their family, not only you're talking about your mother and father and grandparents and all that, you're talking about Ramallah collectively. You're talking about the clans of Ramallah. You're talking about the migration of a man and his sons from a town or an area, wasn't a town at the time, called Shobak in Jordan, and they settled in Ramallah. And that started Ramallah. At the same time, another man and his sons migrated from the same area. Now this is story has it. I mean, this is not, who knows how true it is, but this has been the common belief. They migrated from the same area and they settled in Al-Bire, which is the sister city to Ramallah, next door, it's almost one city now. And one family was Christian and one family was Muslim. And story has it is the reason they migrated because these two men were very close friends, just like brothers. And when both their wives were pregnant, they promised each other that if one has a boy and one has a girl, they're going to get them married. And it turned out that one did have a boy, one had a girl. And when they grew up, they wanted to get them married. The tribe or the community there did not accept that a Muslim family and a Christian family, they did not accept interreligious marriages. We're talking the 16th century. So they moved from that area and they settled in Ramallah and Al-Bire as two families that believed this is not the right thing, that we are all the same. We are all children of God, regardless of what our religion is. And they left that community and settled in Ramallah and Al-Bire. Again, this is a story in history. I cannot claim its accuracy. I don't think anybody can. But the reason I'm mentioning it is because it says a lot about Ramallah and Al-Bire. It says a lot about the people's open mind about the others. People are not like us, regardless of what this otherness is. So that is Ramallah, and that is Al-Bira, and that's the family of Ramallah. The first mention of Ramallah as a human settlement, and settlement here is used not in the sense that we know it now, because settlement nowadays talks about Israeli settlements, but the first area that was inhabited, first mention of Ramallah goes back to the 13th century in a Crusader manuscript, or in the 12th century manuscript, or 13th, I'm not sure. But that is the first mention of Ramallah in history, and it was called at that time Ramalia in that Crusader manuscript. Also, there is mention in history of Ramallah being an Aramaic word that goes even before that, and which means, Ram means hill, and it means the hill of God. So that is the history of Ramallah I grew up learning as a child. And that is the Ramallah that is so inclusive that I grew up knowing. Most villages around Ramallah are Muslim villages. Historically, Ramallah was a Christian village. And as a child, I remember whenever there is a Muslim holiday, my uncle was the mayor of Ramallah when I was a child. And I would go with him from one village to the other, paying, respects for the holiday, whether it's Al-Adha, Ramadan, or something. And when there is a Christian holiday, our house was full for days, all these people coming to wish us a happy holiday, So this is the Ramallah I grew up in. It is so accepting, and it is so interdenominational. If you go to the old city of Ramallah, the ancient Roman church is right there in the center of town, and next to it is the mosque. And that's the Ramallah I know. So Ramallah to me is more than a place, it is an idea. This is emotional for me a little bit, because these were, good old days. Ramallah is an idea of coexistence. Ramallah is an idea of everybody is equal. Everybody has a voice. And that's the Ramallah I grew up in, and that's the Ramallah I believe in, and that's the Ramallah that hopefully will continue to be.